No, but I mean, so good afternoon, everybody. So the time to start and Roundtable on the role of the Ukrainian Diaspora. My name is Lucie, and I will be moderating this event. Today's discussion brings together scholars, practitioners, and stakeholders to reflect on a topic of growing importance. How diaspora communities stay humanitarian responsive, support all societies, and contribute to Ukraine's recovery and future development. As we have seen since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, Ukrainian diaspora played a critical role not only in providing humanitarian and financial assistance, but also in mobilizing international support and contributing expertise to reconstruction and policy debate. This roundtable, organized by the Department of Development and Environmental Studies at Palacký University of Olomouc, creates a space to examine these dynamics in greater depth. I would like to thank the head of the department, Koziienko, for supporting this event. This event follows our focus on the reconstruction and development lifelong education course, organized by the department with the support of IOM in 2024, and a series of roundtables in 2024 and 2025. I also thank the panelists. I will introduce them in a moment, and online participants for allowing time for this important discussion. I would also like to thank my colleagues for their help in organizing this event. Before we begin, a few personal notes. Those of you here in the room will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the discussion. And for participants joining us online, please feel free to submit your questions at any time via the chat window. Also, I would like to check the sound, if you can hear us okay. Please write into the discussion window or the chat window, and we will do our best to address as many possible questions, as possible during the Q&A, and we plan to finish before 5 p.m. It's likely that we will not be able to answer all the questions, so I encourage you to continue the discussion afterwards in person or in writing. And before introducing all our panelists, we will begin with a keynote speech by Dr. Romashchenko titled The Ukrainian Diaspora in the Fifth Year of the War, From Socio-Economic Response to Academic Engagement. Taras Romashchenko is a Ukrainian economist and author whose research focuses on international economic relations, global migration, the Ukrainian diaspora, and the migration development nexus. He is an associate professor in the Department of Economics and International Economic Relations at Palacký National University of Czechia in Ukraine, and he also serves as a visiting professor and senior lecturer at Bielefeld University, Germany. Now, I would like to thank Taras that he came here all the way in person, because it took him almost 14 hours to get here by train. He had the option to participate online, but he decided to be here at Assoc. Thank you so much for being here. He's also a member of the IMSCO Standing Committee for Migration and Refugees and co-chairs the German-Ukrainian academic discussion series Lunchbox dedicated to contemporary Ukrainian intellectual life. He holds a Ph.D. in International Economic Relations from the University of Economics and State. His publications explore various topics such as Ukrainian labor migration, international mobility of highly skilled workers, remittances, and migration policy. His recent research addresses the socio-economic and demographic challenges Ukraine faces amid ongoing full-scale Russian invasion, including wars and regional migration, and the role of the Ukrainian diaspora in the country's socio-economic. So, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Once again, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for such a nice presentation. It's my pleasure to be here today. Thank you for that invitation, which happened a couple, weeks or months ago. And I really think that it was a kind of a stressful experience because, we sport usually when we usually work in our so-called very narrow sensibilities. And in my case, it's about migration studies, but it's about return migration. But then there came an invitation from Lucie that can you please be at our disposal with a keynote speech. And usually keynote speech means that there should be some kind of generalized interpretation of the problematics of the topic, and that was really challenging, but I gladly accepted that challenge, and hopefully my today's input will be of some use to all the honorable audience, either online or offline, so hopefully it will be useful to you. And the topic of today's presentation is the Ukrainian diaspora in the fifth year of the war for socio-economic response to academic engagement. And first of all, when we speak about diaspora, we should probably trace the roots of what diaspora is. And the first slide gives you the possibility, let's say, to compare the global and Ukrainian dimensions of understanding what is diaspora. So there are tons and tons of definitions of what diaspora is. I just stick to one, which was given by the International Organization for Migration and Migratory Policy Institute in 2012. It's just general, quite nice to my mind definition, which says that diaspora is about immigrant that stand outside the country of birth or ancestry, and will have to maintain some tie to the country of origin, so material type, ethnic type, and so on. Can we say that Ukrainian diaspora is something typically different? Probably not. Ukrainian diaspora can be described within this first definition. But I wanted to find out some specific features which can be quite, let's say, typical, specific to the Ukrainian case. And here I went to the definition which was given by a friend of mine, Viktor Satsevich, prominent professor from Macková University in Canada, and he is probably one of the most famous academic who wrote a big book, well, substantial book on which is called the Ukrainian Diaspora in 2002. And according to his definition of the diaspora, of the Ukrainian diaspora, is a socially constructed formation of dispersed populations shaped by successive waves of migration and again who have some ethnic identity and ties to homeland. So you see that the waves are highlighted. So probably it's a specific, to some extent, way, at least I would like to consider it like this, specific feature of the Ukrainian case that we can say that the Ukrainian diaspora was formed and expanded within several successive waves of migration. And the next slide gives you the possibility to see those classical waves of migration of Ukrainian diaspora. So all in all, we have 4 waves, from first to fourth, and classically we consider that the first wave of Ukrainian diaspora formation started at the end of the 19th century, roughly was from 1883. Well, and later on there were some waves. You can see the duration of those waves and the determinants of those migration waves, which lately formed Ukrainian diaspora. So those determinants you can see mainly socio-economic, political, and other reasons. And classically, you will consider that Ukrainian diaspora is formed within 4 waves, and the last wave started since the collapse of the Soviet Union in, I think, 1991. But you can see that I have highlighted in comment like 2022. So I argue that right now, these books or papers are written. So, and probably in some decades, the new analysis of Ukrainian diaspora will say that they cannot 4 classical waves, but probably 5 waves. And I argue that starting from the 24th of February, when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started, we are witnessing the onset of the fifth so-called weakening wave of Ukrainian diaspora expansion. And it's probably, yes, it's probably like this because but at the point of view, somebody says, some scholars say that probably that fifth wave started in 2014 when there was the initial wave of Russian invasion, the invasion of Crimea. But taking into account the scope, the bulk of the figures of those people who left Ukraine since 2022, since February, I should argue that probably classically that wave will be considered from 2022. And according to the latest evaluation of the United nations. As of February, March of 2026, roughly 6 million, no less than 6 million Ukrainians are considered to be post-migrants worldwide. And this figure gives the possibility to the United Nations Organization to name the Ukrainian diaspora among the largest diasporas in the world as of 2024. You can see that almost about 10 million people, Ukrainians nowadays, are considered to be Ukrainian diaspora. But we should not misled by this figure, because these are 10 million Ukrainians, which are considered according to the United Nations to be Ukrainian diaspora. These are only Ukrainians who were born in Ukraine and nowadays live abroad. And it's not about taking into account the standards of those who were born initially in Ukraine. And from that perspective, probably the more accurate data statistics can be provided by some other evaluation estimations. And one of them is one that was given by the Ukrainian World Congress. And what is written on their papers on their website, that today represent the interests of over 25 million Ukrainians through organized communities in more than 80 countries. So probably we cannot say distinctly that today Ukrainian diaspora consists of 25 million, but according to different estimations, it's roughly from maybe 20 to 25 million Ukrainians living. So migrants and the descendants of the previous migrants from the previous waves. Okay, surely when we speak about Ukrainian diaspora, here we come to the core discussion about today's meeting. Ukrainian diaspora starting from the 2020 second the year of the full-scale invasion was not staying aside. It was actively engaging with all methods, with all happenings that took place in Ukraine because of the invasion. And on this slide, you can see, accumulated probably the most important types of engagement of interaction of Ukrainian diaspora worldwide with Ukraine as a country of origin, and with abroad as well. So the most important things we can say is about humanitarian aid, comprehensive assistance to refugees while they found themselves in exile. Surely it's about assistance to the armed forces of Ukraine by means of fundraising, and gathering funds to provide army with necessary armed vehicles and whatnot when we start educating. So economic engagement, for sure, it's about fundraising, remittances, nowadays it's something beyond, for instance, investment into Ukraine, and on support. Support for vulnerable groups, for instance, when for example, veterans are coming to veterans from the Russian-Ukrainian war, to some countries abroad for healing their wounds, so there's also in that respect. Advocacy for Ukraine, development of education and community, either in Ukraine or abroad as well. So policy shaping, another white lies about countering Russian global influence and the ratings of countering propaganda and other ways. It's also the third and very important assignment for Ukrainian diaspora. And one of the last things about time and how diplomacy. I should admit that all these activities are taking place right now in different countries all over the world, for sure. Well, but we can say that taking into account the flow, we can say that there can be observed some kind of a shift of what activities were at the beginning of the invasion and what are nowadays. Surely there are still humanitarian aid assistance for the armed forces of Ukraine, but we can probably, we will discuss it today later, hopefully, we say that Ukrainian diaspora nowadays for more than 4 years after the start of the invasion is dealing with more intangible ways of interaction about the Ukrainian focus, Ukraine time, diplomacy, and so on. So in different contexts, all these interactions can be of different importance, but we can say that generally this to some extent shifts from more tangible to more intangible interactions. The next slide. When I was evaluating what are the main actors of diaspora interaction with the country of origin, with Ukraine and globally, so I came up with the following scheme, and this is the multi-level framework of the diaspora interaction. So quite obvious that the diaspora mainly is represented with individual and institutional actors. So individual is like just ordinary general public, that ordinary people who found themselves abroad, and they want to assist somehow to help the Ukraine or to stay active about right standing, volunteering abroad, helping refugees. So academic engagement and so institutional actors. So it's about local, by the way, all the organizations can be classified like local, national, and international aid organizations. And there is also another type, which is called umbrella aid organizations. So these organizations are, let's say, mostly international, and they observe other local organizations within their structure. So these aid organizations, which are located worldwide, are also very active within interaction with Ukraine. And another thing is about intermediary interaction. So it's not about purely diaspora, Ukrainian diaspora organization, or purely diaspora individual members. It's about international government, international organizations, as well as NGOs of different types. And they are, in fact, mediation and sponsorship of two first actors, institutional and individual actors. I mean that these intermediary assistance and interaction helps the first two groups to interact with the Ukraine more efficiently. And later on, I would like just that this is just a general vision of that framework on level interaction. And the next slides, which I'm going to present you, will show you just several examples of how it is happening within different examples, either on individual, institutional, or intermediary level. So I'm not able to quote here all tens and hundreds of organizations, but just a few examples for you to get the vision how it's going on about that interaction engagement of the diaspora with the help of with the country of origin. So the first slide is about already mentioned Ukrainian World Congress. This is the umbrella, the type of this. It is institutional level, by the way. You see the right to the left, you see the red highlight. Well, and Ukrainian World Congress is an umbrella organization, the diaspora organization. So this is the mother of all, let's call it like this, the mother of all Ukrainian diaspora organizations worldwide. So it is encompassing almost all the organizations from all the continents and the land. So, and it was quite obvious that I chose this very organization to show how it reacts to the invasion, what types of interaction, mainly streamlined directions, it develops in its daily activity. And surely, so these directions are like military and security support. So there are particular initiatives like United with Ukraine and Army of Drones and some other initiatives. So within this main direction of activity, so this organization, the diaspora organization of Ukrainians, helped the Ukrainian front, the Ukrainian soldiers, army, to equip them with some weapons, defense, machinery, and so on and so forth. And according to the latest data, in 2022, roughly, more than $75 million were gathered fundraised by this organization and spent for all those different equipments, defense and military equipment. So about armored vehicles, about drones, even you can see there was recently bought one helicopter from the Ukrainian Diaspora and sent to Ukraine. So another direction is about advocacy and global society mobilization. So here the main initiative is Settlers Ukraine, probably you heard about it. So it encompasses 81 countries, more than 800 cities, and more than 2,000 events have been already organized. And so within these events, the Ukrainian diaspora representatives in different parts of the world are drawing attention to the Ukrainian war, to the war in Ukraine, to the Ukrainian agenda, and so on. And another thing is about reconstruction and resilience. So here the main project or initiative is like Energize Ukraine. According to that initiative, and according to the data which is given by the Ukraine World Congress, over 4 million consumers in Ukraine were got the possibility to restore their electric power in Ukraine. Especially it was very important this year when Russia was fiercely bombing Ukraine, Ukrainian power plants, and the like. So only in 2025, according to WC data, roughly 60 schools were assisted with mobile power plants from this organization in Kyiv region, Kyiv and Kyiv region. So this is the example of institutional engagement and the assistance of the Ukrainian Diaspora organization to Ukraine in times of hostilities since 2022. The next slide is about the intermediary level. So the level of mediation when some third-party actors are helping Ukrainian, either individual or diaspora organization, to engage with the country or engage with Ukraine. And here I took two examples. So as part of that, from Germany right now. So I took the GIZ and Federal Ministry for Economic Development of Germany, and GIZ is in English like German Corporation for International Cooperation. Well, these two governmental bodies in Germany, they have introduced in 2023 the comprehensive program which is called Shaping Development Korean Migration. So the idea of the main direction of activities within this program of GIZ and BFZ. So highlighted here on the slide. And the idea is just to help migrants of different ways to either in countries in host countries or in countries of origin, to help them to interact with the countries of origin, the places where they were born initially. So to make migration, roughly speaking, more efficient for the sake of both host countries and countries of origin. And one very important direction of that of this very program, by the way, the program is called MAP, abbreviated. So the program is between 2023 to 2027, and 14 partner countries. Among those 14 partner countries, there is Ukraine. So GIZ and BMZ, they are working with Ukraine in particular. So one of the main, what is interesting for us about the direction which says that there should be some kind of cooperation with the diaspora or in countries of origin and Ukraine in particular. And the next slide shows us what exactly these two intermediary bodies mean when they say that there should be develop some kind of cooperation with the diaspora. It's about diaspora experts, initiative, diaspora organizations, and the idea for development in the countries of origin. So, in other words, to say it briefly, because we are short of time, the idea is these two organizations provide funding, for instance, to diaspora experts, which gain some experience in the countries where they now reside, to move back for a short period of time, to move back home, and to share their experience with some governmental bodies, with some businesses, those who invited them in the country of origin, to share their experience for the sake of development of the countries of origin. The diaspora organization is like the same. these two governmental bodies in Germany, so governmental agencies, they assist the diaspora organizations, for instance, in Germany, to establish links with organizations in our case, in Ukraine. So business idea for development is like the same. They assist those Ukrainians who possess some business experience, expertise, and want to share that expertise and maybe to introduce their businesses in the country of origin. They can apply and get some funding and move back home to introduce their business idea to the sake of the country of origin, in our case, for the sake of Ukraine. Interesting thing, when I was examining all this, like a scholar, I usually want to have some figures, numbers. What are the results of that program in case of Ukraine? And I contacted the colleagues who are responsible in Ukraine for developing this very program in cooperation with the diaspora. Unfortunately, I should admit that there are no definite figures as of now, probably because this program is ongoing. Maybe after 2027, there will be some definite results concerning Ukraine in particular. So after that, probably we are going to know how many diaspora experts visited Ukraine, in which spheres they were employed, how many diaspora organizations were also participating in this very initiative by GIZ and PMZ. And so, but nevertheless, I found the information. So, sorry. Not only video, but we don't have time for videos. Anyway, I found several official examples on the website of these institutions in Germany, where they show definite examples how Ukrainian diaspora expert Alla moved from NGO in Germany to Ministry for Development and Communities and Territories of Ukraine and shared for a certain period of time her experience in order to develop that governmental body in Ukraine. Another interesting case is the kind of Ukrainian Diaspora organization, Future Link in Germany, which found, due to the financing of these governmental bodies from Germany, the possibility with the Ukrainian charitable foundation, so-called Kohati, in Ukraine, and they both, Ukrainian diaspora in Germany and Ukrainians in Ukraine, began to renovate buildings for forcibly displaced Ukrainians throughout in the western part of Ukraine. So this is an initiative which was developed in this very sphere in the Ukraine diaspora organization engagement. So this video, they are quite short. If you have desire, you can see them on YouTube within that official website channel. If it's interesting for you, you can see these examples. Okay, and do we have time? Not much. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you. So I'm moving to another example of institutional engagement. And here we go to the topic which is quite close to me because I represent academia, and we can see that according to the Ministry of Education and Ukraine, over 5,000 scholars left Ukraine since the start of the invasion. And probably the expertise of those scholars, me and you, some of you here, that expertise can be useful to Ukraine, to its reconstruction and recovery process. And on that ground, the Ukrainian Science Diaspora platform, a digital platform, was established with the help again with PMZ, GIZ, Ministry of Education of Ukraine, and some other sponsors. The mission is to unite Ukrainian scholars worldwide, to reach Ukrainian science into the global research system, support Ukrainian recovery through academic engagement. So this is the mission of this organization. For activities, you can see in another yellow block and read them. So it's about networking, facilitating research collaboration, mentorship programs, science diplomacy again, mobilizing diaspora expertise, frequent work construction, and so on. So this digital platform is nowadays actively developed. You can easily find it on the web and see what main directions, what are key results of this activity, how these mission goals are achieved and what activities are realized. I just want to show you just one screenshot. When you go to the site, opening the map, and you can see worldwide in real time how many Ukrainian schools in which part of the world, in which country are they. You can zoom in or zoom out, and you can see definitely in which city of this very country, which school is. And you, the example, maybe not really example for my side, okay. I found my there is where I'm from, which is my alma mater, and where I'm nowadays, which sphere I represent, and so it can be easily spotted by you if you want to go to that website and see. And the founder of this Ukrainian Science Diaspora platform, Professor Polishuk, kindly shared with me several interesting slides. In October, November 2025, there was a survey between those scholars who were registered within the platform, and you can see, speaking about the academia worldwide, about its gender structure, when they left Ukraine, level of education, mainly it's persons doing the majority of cases with Ph.D, age, field of time, and so on, and also in which countries they mostly reside. The next slide will show you that how they usually actively participate with Ukraine, with the country of origin. Surely, when we speak about Ukrainian academics, they mainly cooperate with Ukrainian institutions in academic spheres, so joint publications, joint research projects, all the charitable things, joint cooperation grant application, and so on. Today, again, some kind of individual level of interaction. We talked about intermediary, institutional, and finally individual level. I can prove that I've been a member of representative of academia, also participate in all those fields like research publication, teaching, for instance, in Germany, and in Austria, in my case, science diplomacy, my speech at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin, global networking. So presentation was given in New York last year. So all in all, I can prove on my, maybe not really humble, but I can say that we are doing something in our academic center. We are doing something. Here are the results to some extent. So, and key takeaways from my today's presentation. So the emergence of the fifth wave of Ukrainian diaspora happening right now since the 2022. We are witnessing its all. So as a result of forced migration, Ukrainian diaspora has become one of the largest globally for sure. So multi-level framework of the Ukrainian interaction is about individual development, institutional, and intermediary. And as I mentioned before, a gradual broadening of support from humanitarian, socio-economic, and defense efforts at the first stages of invasion to solve our engagement later on in 2025, 2026. So we can observe this shift right now. And saying about this diaspora interaction engagement, we should admit that all that engagement is not really easy. There are some challenges and issues, and the top challenges you can see here, key challenges like funding gaps for sure, lack of expertise, whom to interact with, how to interact, growing fatigue, either within host societies and growing fatigue also within the Ukrainian diaspora members. So people got used to that war, and it's a huge challenge. And finally, networking, communication, and bureaucratic barriers as well. These are the main challenges. So here are the references. If you want, I can share them with you as well. And thank you very much for your attention. Дякую за позорність, дякую за увагу. And some speakers skills.
The wonderful presentation. You will currently get a chance to respond if there are any points in the keynote speech that that we would like to focus on the bureaucratic barriers. Unfortunately, Natalia and Dziadyk couldn't come today, as she was one of the panelists here, but due to her visa issues, she's joining us online and she's not here in person, so we're really sorry about that. Now I will introduce the panelists. Those of you who are here can also take some light refreshments. They're at the back. Feel free to take them as we speak. The first on my right hand side is Alla Fedorova, who is an associate professor of the Institute of International Relations of Ščedryk, National University of Kyiv, and research at the Faculty of Law of Palacký University of Olomouc. Since 2023, she has been a member of the European Committee of Social Rights. As a national and international expert, she has cooperated with various EU, Council of Europe, and OSCE projects, including the Council of Europe projects such as protection of internally displaced persons in Ukraine, internal displacement in Ukraine, building solutions, and many other projects. She is a national expert in the EU network of legal experts in the area of free movement of workers and social security coordination. And a certified trainer of the Council of Europe program for human rights education for legal professionals. Alla Fedorova is also vice president of Ukrainian Association of European Law, deputy editor-in-chief of Ukrainian Journal of International Law, author of numerous publications in the sphere of human rights, social, and labor law. Our next panelist over there, Janská, is a Czech social geographer specializing in international migration, diaspora studies, and the social spatial dynamics of population change in Central and Eastern Europe. She is affiliated with Charles University in Prague, and she has made significant contributions to research and teaching in migration and human geography. Her work integrates quantitative and qualitative methodologies to analyze migration trends, diaspora formation, and transnational ties, as well as processes of migrant integration and their impacts on urban and regional development. She has recently published a book titled Transnational Trajectories and Diaspora Policies, the case of Czechia and occurs in Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia. The next panelist, Ruslana, is a social anthropologist and a Ph.D. candidate in the Department of Sociology and Social Anthropology at Central European University, Vienna. Now, Vienna, Budapest. She is also a Ph.D. fellow at CEPRIS, the French Research Center in Humanities and Social Sciences in Prague. Her research interests include citizenship, gender, masculinity, and displacement. Her doctoral research explored the experiences of Ukrainian adult civilian men as affected by the limited mobility outside into the travel ban and within the country due to the mobilization processes under martial law, which was introduced in response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And she's also part of the research group working on the project Arrival Infrastructures, Processes of Emplacement of Displaced People from Ukraine in Vienna, which was run by the Institute of Human Sciences in Vienna within its Europe-Asia Research Platform on Forced Migrations. Okay, and Yuliya is an assistant professor at the Department of Biotechnology here at this very faculty of Palacký University of Olomouc. Her teaching and research focus on parasitic plants, cytoskeleton, systems biology, and plant tissue cultures. So she became part of the first wave of Ukrainian refugees and joined the department in 2015 through the Segrad Fund scholarship that's even before the new wave of Ukrainian diaspora. And after the full-scale outbreak of war in Ukraine, Dr. Krasylenko became actively involved in assisting newly arrived Ukrainians. In collaboration with other volunteers, she contributed to organizing transportation, providing interpretation, and facilitating basic orientation in an unfamiliar environment. And this activity led to the establishment of the NGO Ščedryk, which has since developed into a platform offering educational, culture, and integration activities while creating a safe and supportive environment for Ukrainian children and adults. And in recognition of her long-term volunteer engagement, Dr. Krasylenko was awarded a prize by Palacký University in 2025, and an acknowledgement of the collective effort of the broader Ukrainian volunteer community. So we have a fantastic panel here. Some of those people here have lived experience of the Ukrainian diaspora. And we even got the gender balance right, 25% male academics and 75% female Ukrainian academics, so that's fantastic. And I would like to invite you, if you would like to respond to the keynote speech, or you can move to our questions if there are any pressing issue now that you would like to share at the beginning of the panel. Yes, please.
I would like to start with question, something one from the first slide. You know, I was really impressed. It's that whole wave. Yeah, so it's you said that the first four waves are successful. And what's it?
Excessive.
Excessive.
Excessive. Not excessive.
Yeah. So and what's about the fifth?
So the fifth, as according to my vision, as I mentioned, it's a kind of a forced migration expansion of Ukrainian diaspora. So I argue that it started since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022. According whether successful, no, I'm not saying about success. It's about success. It's step by step. There are. So I can just repeat myself once again. There are point of view that probably the classical waves lasted since 1991 till 2014, and some scholars I know them that they say probably the fifth wave started not in 2022, but in 2014 when there was the invasion of Crimea. But according to the scope of those who left Ukraine in 2020, probably the fifth wave in some decades it will be written in books, new books which are written right now, probably, or will be written sometime. It will be written that probably the fifth wave of Ukrainian diaspora expansion started in 2020. Maybe I'm wrong, but as of now I think this.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry for this. Thank you
so much. Would you like to, maybe you, would you like to respond on the conceptualization of Ukrainian diaspora? Because that I the expert on diaspora. So.
Thank you for introducing me. You have mentioned in your first slide the definition of diaspora, which is very broad, the definition of IOM. I use it as well because it could cover all variations of diaspora. I'm interested in Czech diaspora, and I think that this is very much similar ties. Yeah, I mean the study of diasporas, because you study ties, relations, consciousness, engagement. You have mentioned all of it, and you study this on various levels, like individual, institutional. You have mentioned intergovernmental. Okay, but we can also add, because we are geographers, we can add the levels like a local level, regional level, national level, European level, worldwide. You have mentioned how many Ukrainians are worldwide. Comparing to Czech diaspora, we are only 2.5 million, I mean, including descendants. So, what interesting me is the engagement and role of diaspora organizations, because I focus in my research, part of that research focus on the language knowledge, like the heritage language, which is quite, I think, in relation to Ukrainian case, is quite important to mention, because it expect that some of the Ukrainians will return. We don't know how many, and this is the rising question about the future development of Ukrainian fifth migration return. So I think those organizations like the schools and education system in, you have mentioned 60 or 80 countries where diaspora is settled.
More than that.
Yeah. So this is quite an important part. And so my maybe question, or maybe the topic which I could raise, is that in which extent you think that these activities of those education, like schools, would help to bring scholars and families and also students back to Ukraine. So yeah, maybe this context. maybe mention and discuss.
And maybe it's a question to all of you. If you might also respond, it's about debating how the diasporas can contribute somehow to the countries of origin and also extend the question from one environment, from the school, but also extend it to other domains, right? Culture and social and political. So if you'd like to respond.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, as long as we speak about ethnic belonging, and then we speak, so usually when we speak about diaspora members, they have that feeling of ethnic belonging to their country of origin. And surely, if those people remain in exile in host countries, and they just stay there without any connections to their country of origin, without studying at schools, later on with some, let's say, Sunday schools at churches, for instance, and so on and so forth. If there is not all of that, probably their ties, connections will be lost. Maybe even sooner than later. That's why I guess the question is quite correct. The possibility to tie within, so to be let's say, if you speak about code, to be the pupil of the Ukrainian code or an Ukrainian club, it will preserve your and develop your belonging to Ukraine. And for instance, just very narrow example. And other things can be explained in this the similar way. The more actions, the more these initiatives in host countries with orientation to Ukraine are there, then the more possibilities for Ukrainians one day to return. Surely it will depend. It doesn't mean that if people attend here in the Czech Republic or in Germany, for instance, and then one day, okay, I know the language, Ukrainian language, because I attended the school, and okay, I will return to Ukraine. No. There should be a comprehensive approach, meaning that changes should be, so some development of that belonging should be preserved and developed here, set here, and all the changes, by the way, it's the topic which I'm dealing with, so it's about voluntary return. And in my papers, which were just there, I think that some definite action from on behalf of the Ukrainian government and partners to be done in order to develop comprehensive repatriation programs. And those programs, among other things, should be based on efficient economic incentives. So, in other words, if Ukraine, hopefully soon after the war is over, will develop in a positive way, then probably more returns will be taken into account, and those ties that you mentioned won't be lost.
It's important part of keeping ties.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's by the way, one remark to the organization of scholars you mentioned. We have a similar one. We have it's mainly Czech spots, and we try to unify all those Czechs that are living abroad, but also those who are returning back. So this is quite important, and this organization is based in Prague. So, but probably you talk about the organization which is probably it's digitally, but the head office is in Ukraine. I mean virtual.
This is worldwide.
I wanted to say something. On my way, some states have launched the voluntary return programs, and in EU, of course. But the key point is that the success, as you have already mentioned, depends on a lot of different circumstances. And first and foremost, with security conditions in Ukraine that we have to control. And you have already mentioned, this is Ukraine's own strategy. And I think a lot about this strategy. And now Ukraine will need a really comprehensive, well-designed strategy. But what will need? Ukraine needs right now this strategy. So we don't need to postpone the elaboration of the strategy. We have to work on this strategy and policy. Even we have already started. Not now. Even we probably several years ago. And I think that this strategy should include, from my point of view, 3 key elements. The first, this is really social guarantees. So social benefits, access to housing, targeted reintegration programs, real opportunities for employment, etc. But I think that legal certainty will be really very important, especially for people, for Ukrainian men who would like to return, and because of all these rules, mobilization and everything. So people have to know everything about possible sanctions, about possible consequences. So legal certainty, I think it's really very important for the decision about voluntary return. And the third thing, or the third element that cannot be ignored, this is reconciliation. And reconciliation between those who stayed in Ukraine and those who left. So of course, who I brought down in Czechia, in Germany, in a lot of other countries. So sometimes even now, we can feel this, I would say even with my colleagues from Ukrainian university, sometimes we feel this, that how to try to say, it's not the bad feelings or attitude, but there is a tension. You are absolutely right. But something was changed. So I think that this reconciliation can be also a problem, and somehow it should be included into the strategy. And without clarity on all these aspects, large-scale returns will be unrelevant from my point of view. Ideally, this should be a coordinated multi-level program between EU and Ukraine. But there is also another question that I allow myself to ask all of you. Do EU member states actually want economically active Ukrainians of workable age with stable job to return? And this is also a question. So that's why in practice, this can create a tension between migration policy and returning policy, and we have to think about this as well. And another, the last question that I would like to say. So the important point is that in this discussion that we have now about voluntary return concerns only those Ukrainians who will be able to stay in the EU states after temporary protection ends. Because for others, there will be no options. Just transition period, and it is all. Or irregular stay in illegal status, or they will have to return. And I think that this uncertainties we have to understand as well. I mean, pensioners, so inactive Ukrainians, pensioners, people with disabilities, some other groups. Yes.
Well, there is a lot to react to, but I first want to react to what Alla said. Like, I cannot stress enough how important that is. This kind of, because so far it has been quite visibilized as fact that many people are not given a pass after the temporary protection, let's say, stops. And the general tendency among the EU states is that it seems like in many countries have been already introduced, and many other countries are starting to introduce it, that allowing those Ukrainians who are able to work to remain, while everyone else is kind of not given an option, while there are so many vulnerable populations, women with caring responsibilities, elderly people, people with disabilities, and yeah, that is not discussed. And I wanted to also because I think I'm not an expert in diaspora, I work on topics of displacements, so I usually think more in terms of, let's say, experience of displacement. And for me, when I think about comparisons between waves or people who migrated before 2022 and after 2022, I quite often come across this kind of comparison between economic migrants and displaced people, which I think is a very dangerous, if not inappropriate way to compare, because it kind of reproduces the narratives, but also the practices of EU countries to treat displaced Ukrainians actually as labor migrants. What we see now, that only those who are capable to work will be given a chance to stay, most probably. So this tendency, and this was there from the very beginning when the temporary protection came with this kind of accent on look how many rights you are given, and one of the rights is accent from the right to access to the labor market. And from there was this expectation that you are supposed to become self-sufficient, and there are many as support started already, some countries started already cutting certain support even in summer 2022. This tendency just has been growing over the years. So I only think when we compare these waves, or what is a way that is not, what is a way to think about them and experiences of those people, on the one hand, without generalizing them too much, but on the other way, on the other hand, also not reproducing this kind of EU narratives and practices. That's one thing. Another thing, I also, yes, I cannot stress enough the importance of the legal solutions. First of all, amnesty, if we're talking specifically about MED. Of course, there will be tensions. There are already many tensions, but I think the state approach to these tensions, and if there will be the certain stance of the state, that might at least mitigate these tensions in the future. But that's there are so many questions around what would be allowed, when, how long. Also looking back at how this kind of reconciliation happened during or after Yugoslav wars. That might happen right away, it might happen in a year or in a few years, and that's why it could also change a lot. Okay, I'll stop here because
Thank you so much for pointing out all those different tensions between the people who stay in Ukraine, those who are in the diaspora, but also between the different groups of the Ukrainian diaspora, because it's not a unified monolithic thing, it's something that is more stratified. And maybe if I could follow up on this and ask about the different forms of engagement that have emerged, and also maybe some concrete examples of successful initiatives. Yuliya, I'd like to thank you very much for some examples.
Yes, I'm representing the Ukrainian NGO here in Olomouc, organized in 2023, Ščedryk, as it was mentioned. And what I would like to say about members of Ščedryk, that they are, first of all, they are employed, or they try to be employed. And they are seeking for connections with all institutions, if they are scholars, or they are always involved in contact because they are constantly migrating to Ukraine and back. They are working at the startups, and they try to be connected as often as several times per year. So the successful initiatives regarding little people are small businesses, small initiatives regarding the groups of helps mothers, kids, and also, for example, and under umbrella of Ščedryk, we have the school. It's a Ukrainian culture school working on Saturdays, where we are educating Ukrainian kids, helping them to keeping identity, inviting lecturers, experts of different fields to perform. And also we tried to establish the initiative to collect and to construct some drones, and as it was mentioned by Taras, to transport them to Ukraine, because unfortunately the military support we wanted to establish here in Olomouc, but we faced with the non-positive perception by a local society of such initiatives. It can be humanitarian aid, yes, but not even making the masking devices. And we are trying to establish this initiative, so we are donating, but we cannot do this openly. Therefore, probably not all Ukrainian NGOs are allowed or successful examples of this military support. For example, the armed forces of Ukraine or army of drones. But as for humanitarian initiatives, we are quite successful as well from Ukrainian advocacy. We are trying to regularly, annually, to organize events, for example, for commemoration of victims of war. It's 22nd of February of each year. We are making a demonstration with some initiatives at the main square of Olomouc, and it's called Action Against Fear. And we are speaking loudly and inviting volunteers who have their experiences from other cities in the Czech Republic. And probably we would like to be more connected with other Ukrainian NGOs.
And how do you cooperate with the Czech institutions? Very good cooperation, because you mentioned that some activities should not be seen as visible. So how about the cooperation with the state? Do you see this supportive, or are there many bureaucratic barriers for diaspora actors or organizations?
Now I'd like to admit that the Embassy of Ukraine has a new ambassador, and the support through his activity became much more evident, because all our requests and initiatives are supported. For example, the organization of some exhibitions or representation of voice at the general gathering, and direct connections representatives of the government don't have, but we have this intermediate actor, the ambassador, to whom we can directly contact and express what their current needs.
Thank you so much. In general, maybe not just in the Ukrainian context, but in general, are there some other examples of good practice that diaspora organizations use? Is there something that was not seen in the keynote speech? Because there are many activities, very humanitarian, political, advocacy activities, economic activities, both in the military and so on, from other national contexts in just conflict setting or even in non-conflict setting. Is there something else that we can take away as a practice?
Yeah, if I could add 2 or 3 more things and answer your question. I think that there is also important support from the country of origin. I mean, I don't know the situation how is in Ukraine and how the government protecting and keeping ties with diaspora members, with diaspora organizations. Because the case of Czechia is that the government, in Czechia we don't have any institution which is responsible for keeping ties with diaspora organizations, diaspora members. Most of the bodies belong under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and so on. And I think that the support from the country is very much important, because they afford donations to many programs, cultural programs, or also they try to promote a good name of the country abroad, which in the case of Ukraine, this Apple has created these institutions and organizations, Ukrainian, probably more and more intensively. And well, so I think what we haven't mentioned is we did mention all these important dimensions. Maybe what is more crucial is that what I would add is integration. We didn't mention integration still, and I think in the context of all of you, what you said is that, well, we have to remind that many of the Ukrainians sort of here from the fifth wave, let's say, they already are integrated. I don't know how many, I don't know how many percent of them, but this is the one thing which limit their return. Another thing is that another dimension which I would like to mention is that not all of them belong to diaspora, because who is member of the diaspora is the one who is keeping ties, who is active in the country of destination, and who is keeping ties, who lives transnational life. So what to help those people who don't
themselves.
Yeah, and they are, you know, I know that as the case of Czech people or Czechs living abroad, some of them belong, some of them not belong, because they don't want to have any ties with Czechia. And I'm sure that in the case of Ukraine, it would be the same. That many of Ukrainian people would like to assimilate anywhere. So this is also maybe another dimension which could be discussed within these diaspora dimensions and activities. If there is still potential to catch those people who don't think that who don't perceive them as a diaspora member, and so on and so on. So this is.
I would like to keep thank you very much for raising this question. Really, as an NGO, we're trying to engage all the different Ukrainian which are in Olomouc region and in Olomouc by organizing some national identity events like Romashchenko Day, like Embroidery Skirt Day, or the Independence Month. What we have recognized that they are almost the same people in these events, but we know that in this region there are much more Ukrainians. At the same time, we have a Facebook group which is called Almost Helps Ukraine. It has quite broad scope. And when we are announcing such events, only definitely people are going. But regarding some economic advertisements, some news regarding the provision of pay, or some practical issues about selling something or buying something, more people are responding. So probably this is related to their own choices to stay isolated, not identify themselves with the Ukrainian community and trying to somehow get involved and completely assimilated. But we really wish to take efforts. But response today is somewhat not as strong as we expected.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We also have the representatives of the Regional Center for Integration of Foreigners, and they probably have similar experience. You can discuss it in a moment. And also, I would like to ask about the situation, how it differed from the beginning in 2022, and how it's different now, because there can be some maybe fatigue from the public, and there was this really huge mobilization at the beginning of the wholesale invasion. And we have seen it here in Olomouc, but also Ruslana has seen it in Vienna, right? So what enabled this rapid mobilization at the beginning, and what are the challenges to sustain the support over time, right? Because we're here at this integration and transnationalism dimension. So and comment on these.
The first question.
I mean, again, there is a lot. So on one hand, I can speak from about the experience of political Vienna, on which my colleagues and I did research. But also, for example, for those who were interested in like initiatives in Prague, Margareta was probably online, was supposed to be here. She has a few papers published on activism of Ukrainian displaced people, but also Ukrainian labor migrants came before 2022 on their activism in Prague, and also how their activism was, yes, it was focused on Ukraine and support of Ukraine, but also at the same time how it countered the anti-establishment and far-right narratives widespread in Prague by other populations. And yeah, so I can just refer to the papers for those who are interested. And like just to mention the initiative, for example, Class Ukraina, Voice of Ukraine, which is based in Prague. Speaking about Vienna, I mean, I think it's important to mention Ukrainian diaspora, or a few other groups I will just mention in a second, were among those groups who were somehow not very visible from the very beginning in the support and reception of people from Ukraine, displaced people from Ukraine, because it was very popularized in the news and by politicians, this idea of this quote-unquote exceptional support by the locals, by the Europeans, but also there are other groups like, again, Ukrainian diaspora, but also people who are not from Ukraine or not part of Ukrainian diaspora, but who have somehow cultural ties to the post-Soviet region. But also people who, for example, participated in the reception of display from 2015-2016, and now they got engaged also in 2022, and also people who came as displaced people to Austria in 2015, but then became engaged in 2022 in helping in receiving Ukrainian displaced people. So, and I think the initiative, like this very grassroots initiatives that were among the first to react to the people's needs, they were the most flexible ones because they didn't have to deal with all the bureaucracy that states or city organizations or international organizations deal with. So in a way, they were very flexible and could react immediately to the immediate needs of the people. At the same time, so they kind of feel this gap, especially at the beginning, especially in the few days and weeks, but at the same time, like this state, going to the question of challenges, like, and I think this is a main challenge, that this the over-reliance of states on the civil society, especially at the beginning, eventually led to literally many people being burned out, but also the depletion of resources. And this kind of over-reliance, it's I mean, it continued for a long time, and it kind of resulted in the lack of any sustainable solutions. And it's not like, I mean, it's important, I think, to think about this over-reliance not as something localized that happened just once. It's this kind of, this has been happening, this trend for a long time, because it's usually framed in the terms of like, oh, this is another crisis, it's another emergency, we didn't see this coming. Well, that's not really the case, because there was mass displacement of people in 2015, 2016. States know that this happened. It's like, it's a decision. It's a decision and strategic decision not to have any sustainable structures and solutions to mass displacement of people, which leads to this kind of over-reliance on civil society, and then this bottlenecks and challenges that displaced people face. Yeah, I don't know, I can talk a lot, like, there were many initiatives in Vienna. I don't know how detailed we want to go into this, but like, just to name a few, for example, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic St. Barbara Church was basically the first organization to react and start accumulating everything, basically creating a hub for Ukrainians in Vienna, and creating like infrastructure out of nowhere, for example, establishing hotline way before it was established by the authorities, or hotline for people who were connected, those who can provide accommodation and those who needed accommodation. And this is again something that state can easily and should provide. There were also like educational initiatives, like Ukrainian Education Center, which was created right away for Ukrainian high school kids who were graduating at the same year and who needed to pass the NO, it's a national exam, and who, if they were displaced abroad, didn't have any, like, they didn't have ways to do it, and organized that locally in Vienna. And it was like hundreds of students who were able to pass that exam exactly thanks to that grassroots initiative. So, and there are many examples like that, and just like, I don't know, going back to the question like of good practices, I don't think, because it's kind of civil society initiatives, they are praised, but I don't want to call them good practices because they are usually symptoms of the lack of state support. Those are not good practices, they're just emergency practices which could have been avoided if the support by the state was there. But I think just one good thing that I would want to highlight, and I think it's a very important one, is this kind of solidarity that was created in these initiatives, not only between Ukrainians who were abroad, who came abroad, but also between different displaced people. I mean, Ukrainians, displaced Ukrainians, displaced people from the Middle East, who came to support and receive Ukrainians. I think that is actually a good practice, which has a lot of like political potential. Yes.
Thank you so much. So you highlight also the role of the volunteer initiative, but also the importance of the role of the state, right? And it can be the Ukrainian state, but it can also be the whole state. So what can the state do to help diaspora, to incentivize diaspora engagement? What is the role of the state here?
We also like how the Ukrainian government supported this campaign after this thing, and it came to my mind that recently there was so probably first of all we should say that Ukrainian government and state at the moment is preoccupied with other things. The states which are at the front. So mainly speaking about supply of armed forces to Ukraine. So from that point of perspective to say that there is enough funding from the Ukrainian government to support initiatives, but probably not be honest, because we are badly in dire need of support from the European Union for our needs to support, first of all, our army. But nevertheless, some initiatives, for instance, so-called Unity Hub, were recently introduced by the government, by the, one of our Ukrainian ministries, and I'm not mistaken that those Unity Hubs have already been introduced in Berlin, in Spain, and recently will become ICPD in Prague as well.
Yeah, hello everyone, my name is Natalia, if I could say. Yeah, I'm counselor from Ukrainian Community and Consultation Center based in Prague. And actually we are the first Unity Hub, but the official name is like Ukrainian Community and Consultation Center. But our center is, as well as other centers in Poland and Germany, are part of international Center for Migration and Quality Development, and we, our center support Ukrainians living in the Czech Republic. We help people with consular procedures, with temporary protection, legal stay. We also help them resolve some issues remotely in Ukraine, for example, with pension funds, with D application, and so on. And we also help them prepare documents for Ukrainian consulates, because like there are a lot of work for these consular offices abroad, and we also help with that. And our center is first like community and consultation, so it's not only place for consultations, but also a community space. So we organize different different educational and cultural events, and we just want to help Ukrainians meet each other, share experience, and also support each other. And our main goal is to support people and help them feel safe and build a strong community.
And can you add, are there any initiatives of how to return Ukrainians? Because I read recently that those unity hubs in different countries, probably in the Czech Republic as well, they will be also develop some initiatives to facilitate the process of voluntary return.
Yeah, actually, we could consultate people about returning to Ukraine, but it's not a priority now because of the situation in Ukraine, and we don't push people to return.
No push.
Yeah, and like there are, I guess there aren't some programs or some like ways to return, but we could consultate about how to close medical insurance in Czech Republic, how close temporary protection, etc. So this we could consultate, and actually we have some clients with this issue, but it's not the priority now for other centers.
Thank you so much.
I'd like also to add that space supporting Ukrainian diaspora through embassies and consulates. For example, in Prague we have quite ambassador as well as quite consulate of who are, besides regularly work with documents and other issues, are providing support of many initiatives, mostly cultural, integrated activities from the Ukrainian NGO throughout the Czech Republic. And recently, what we like to administer a network and opportunity to speak online very efficiently, for example, through WhatsApp Messenger, where all representatives of the Ukrainian NGO can add. So it really facilitated communication, and it really enhanced the connection, and we can use ambassador like an intermediate between diaspora and the states. And so I hope that in other countries the embassies are also playing this integrated role.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, so is your initiative part of this unity hub that created by this Ministry of National Unity, or this is like more grassroots thing?
No, actually, like Alla, the center is a part of ICPD program, ICPD project, but we cooperate closely with the Czech Ministry of the Interior and also with the Ukrainian Embassy, of course, and also with the ministry. But this like Unity Hub in Berlin, it's a part also of ICPD project, but in cooperation with the ministry, because like there are a few centers in Europe, like ours, but the key partners are different in every country. So in Poland, they cooperate more with the European Union. In Czech, we cooperate with the Czech Ministry of the Interior. So it's different because it depends of situation in the country.
But probably ICPD is responsible for all of them.
Yeah, like basically, they all are the part of ICPD project.
Thank you so much. Maybe another example would be the Top 10 program that is run by UNDP, and this program engages diaspora members in different countries. So it's a program that has been running since the 70s or 80s. So in each diaspora, some experts are selected and they can return back to their home countries for a short period of time. So it's not a permanent ritual. It's just for a couple of weeks, just to give expertise and maybe help with some technological program, specific projects. So again, it can be another option that can be considered maybe in the future, or I don't know, it's already running. Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned it's like how the GIC and BMC, expert program, expert they just initiative taken. By the way, in Ukraine, I already know that it's not only about short-term period of returning back, for 3 months max. But I also know the program returning experts, and you should leave at least for at least 5 years, I'm not mistaken, for instance in Germany, and then you are, if you have where to return for at least 12 months or 1 year, then you can go to Ukraine to start working there at some institution, public institution, like state, for instance, university. Well, and GIZ will finance additional to that element that you are going to get at that institution. But anyway, you should well share your expertise and knowledge beyond 3 months. I mean, beyond that short period of time.
Yes, this is a very good example. Now, I would like to open up the floor for discussion. If there are any pressing questions, either here from the audience or from those of you who are online. If not, I also have a lot of questions, but
Maybe I would like to connect a couple of things that have been mentioned by several panelists. Alla, for example, at the beginning, you have mentioned that there are assumed at least like 3 safe spaces, safe place conditions, right, for the people to be able to kind of contribute successfully through being actively in Ukraine, and you're also discussing the role of state and all that. And what comes to my mind is the role of trust. To what extent there is a trust from the part of the diaspora towards the institutions to be able to create such space where they actively contribute and safely contribute to the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I think that this future strategy should encompass not only these 3 elements, so this should be a really comprehensive act, and like reconciliation and like a new agreement among Ukrainian society in Ukraine and out of Ukraine, among diaspora, among Ukrainians everywhere. So it should be, so people, Ukrainians abroad should be interested in cooperate in return for a short stay, for 1 year, for several years, to have their children for education. But it should be the condition for this from facilities, conditions, so everything. So that's why I think that it would be really comprehensive strategy. That probably will be really good to open discussion for this future document, not just adopted it by our Prof, our father, but to discuss what should be included. And one more thing that we didn't discuss today. This is not voluntary return, but forfeiture. And I'm really afraid about I'm really afraid of speaking about this speculation that we can read about and listen about, because some countries, EU countries like Germany, for example, have these negotiations. I don't know if it's true or not, but we can read in the media about some kind of discussion about post-return. And I think that this strategy should be based on voluntary return. This for sure, but not on return. If you have time, I can explain from legal point of view, if it's possible within the current framework that we have according to temporary protection or not. But I'm really sure that we couldn't say about most people to return to Ukraine. So this doesn't work. But voluntary return can be really successful if we have this strategy.
Thank you. I agree absolutely, and also because what it means. I feel like very often what is called voluntary is in fact not really, because of the question what is called voluntary, because it might be called voluntary, but when you look at the structures and the conditions, when the structure is the only way for a person to continue existing is to return to Ukraine, this is not voluntary. This is because there is no choice in that situation. So I cannot stress this enough, and I think because the question was about the role of the state and the role of trust, and to create the space of trust for different kinds of people in their way and to contribute and to be part of it actively. Then, what is the reflection of that? Yeah, it's a huge question, and it does really, I think, require a very comprehensive, multi-layered, very thoughtful, and full of care approach, which is probably not feasible because I don't see the signs of the willingness of the side of the government to, I don't know, maybe it's, anyway, okay, I don't want to go there. But it's a big question, but also it's a question that has, there are many groups and many kinds of trust, like if we're talking about men, it's a completely different topic about trust and what and how and why, and like I don't even want to go there at this point. But I think one of the things I would want to highlight here is that I think so far, and absolutely rightly so, over the last 5 years, a lot of focus in when discussing this war was on the survival of the state, because of course it's a threat to sovereignty, it's an existential war, and but I also think it's really important to also recenter people and also think about in terms of survival, because so many people have given up so much for the state to continue existing. So I think the state, Ukrainian state, but also EU states, because they benefited a lot from the Ukrainian displaced people, is really important to recenter people, not as a human capital, but as human beings. That's of course a very broad statement that might mean a lot of practical implications in terms of creating infrastructure for women, for care duties, and not just I don't want to go there.
But I would like to add regarding the trust. Probably something like Dziadyk campaign aims to soften the tension between through Ukrainians, with Ukrainians who states and those who migrate, because it is really polarizing the Ukrainian society in general, not only the diaspora, but there should be some more discussions in public space from probably Ukrainian government, more emphasis on this, because the polarization is increasing, and this is really affecting the society.
So in fact, all these things that we are discussing, trust, sport, and voluntary return, these are the topics which I discovered in my research. Well, in gender, it's about voluntary return, about trust, some publications are there, so we want to share with you some findings, but think about trust. I don't want to go into details. I just would like to leave that if I have made some quality research and I'm just communicating with respondent Ukrainian refugee I1, so they do really want to come back for once in the future. But when I think that really that it can happen, usually they say, we don't believe our authorities to some extent, that they do really want us to come back. That's the point. And I read my interviews, for instance, with Ukrainian refugees. There are some examples. For instance, one lady from academia in Vienna has lost her building or apartment. You're not mistaken, in Kherson region, because of the bombardment. And there is a program in Ukraine which says that, okay, if you have lost your housing, we can finance you, fund you, in order to restore to some extent, to renovate, or to build from a scratch something new. Okay, and that lady from Vienna wanted, for instance, to apply for that program, to get some money in order to come back home. And when she was applying, everything was okay, no problems. And then suddenly she got a refusal from the bank. And the bank, when she connected to their own site in the bank, so it was like unspoken rule that you were applying with IP address from abroad. That means that probably you are supplied with good material condition, technical condition. And surely such people, when they are looking for community, we do not really feel that there is that real want on the side of, we don't see definite persons from the government, but we don't feel that that's support that they do really want us to return voluntarily. Okay, that's it. And on that, from that perspective, we can say that the problem of trust is really a huge problem. And in my papers, I read that argue that the main idea of the state should be just to realize that the future of the country can be only with those Ukrainians who are in Ukraine, inner Ukrainians, and outside Ukrainians, who are outside Ukraine. So there should be the understanding of that. Surely the tension should be addressed by the government between the two groups of Ukraine. But the prosperity of Ukraine is to construct and recover without the return. At least not all of them, 25 million of this million who were forcibly migrated from Ukraine. But at least half of them, if we take into account the experience of Bosnia and Herzegovina, roughly 45% returned. Okay, let's say for Ukraine it would be a good example. If half, let it be 3 million, will return. But the key point which I made it straight in my papers, in my final research, that it should be based, although that voluntary return should be based on comprehensive voluntary programs and not on coercion and threats. If you are threatening somebody that please come back, otherwise it will be deprived of your civil right to Ukraine. In my interviews, Ukrainians told me that okay, if the government is going to coerce me to return to force me, no, it's not the way. I will go somewhere outside of another country. For instance, if the legal status of temporary protection for Ukrainians will be abolished by this European country, then Ukrainians will stay right illegal on a regular basis or move to some other country. But probably this war proved by the fact that Russia cannot threaten Ukrainians. They will pull. The same political about migration process. It's not easy to force or coerce Ukrainians to return. Yeah.
I would build on the word mentioned many times, trust. And since the beginning of this talk, I've made remarks like confidence, reconciliation, fear, worries. This is all about the immigrants here and elsewhere. But at the same time, if I will cover it with the return migration, what we are talking now, I have to mention the what the public opinion will be and is in Ukraine about those who left the country, because most of them, the majority of them remain. First, some of them left. So what they say, because I go to the history of the Czech diaspora in the 40s, 60s, and the trust and recognition of Czechs living abroad were very low by the public, and this is the role of the Ukrainian government, and it was role of the new government in Czechia to popularize and to talk to the public not only about the bad thing that they are immigrants and they left the country because of their profession, but they left also because of other things. And this is the issue what the Ukrainian government think about. So because how the people in Ukraine will perceive those immigrants who come back, voluntary, involuntary, I don't know what will be, and what will be the conditions, and what will be the trust of those Ukrainians living abroad to come back to institutions, to government, to local governments, local organizations, and so on. So that will be, according to me, the huge problem.
Yeah. I have two short comments. First of all, the presentation on the identities. This was the first thing. The left money. So there is no enough money to compensate for all damages to housing. So this was the first step, as I know. And the second comment that I would like to add about trust. Ukraine, unfortunately, Ukraine showed this division, since 2020,
Parliament too, from 2010, because pensioners who are internally displaced persons, they needed regularly to pass this identification. So this is exactly only for internally displaced pensioners, not for other pensioners from Ukraine. And this was the first step. And now these internally displaced persons, former internally displaced persons, who live abroad, for example in Czechia, they need to go to the pension funds and to sign a paper that they don't receive pension from Russian Federation. How can you explain it? From legal point of view, Ukraine authority doesn't have a right to ask this because the person paid social and pension contributions for decades. It means that this person has a right to pension. But for why? What is the reason to see this paper and how they can check it? This is really unreal because we don't have any communication, any diplomatic relations with Russian Federation. And how can this authority check if it's true or not?
Yes, we have another question here from the online audience. Natalia, who is supposed to be here, is asking another question. We also have one question here in person. So I will ask this question on behalf of Natalia, and you can also ask your question and you can decide which one you'd like to respond to. So Natalia wanted to ask, considering diasporas as highly heterogeneous actors that mobilize by taking a specific stance, how do you see the divisions within this heterogeneous group or even groups? Because as we discussed, it's not one monolithic actor. And how do people with different political imaginations in terms of some aspects of the development of Ukrainian state can come together? So there are these divisions in terms of political opinions. So let's think about this question. Thank you so much, Natalia. And would you like to ask something? Thank you.
So I have a rather practical question, I think, because I'm from integration coordination team. Here we belong to Olomouc region, let's say, and we try to work on shaping local policy, like local integration policy. And for us, it's easier when the Ukrainian diaspora is shaped in such NGOs like Ščedryk, or for example here in Olomouc, or for example Ščedryk in Proštějov, because it's easier for us to communicate with Ukrainian diaspora when they are shaped in some NGO. So maybe if you can give me some tips how to support Ukrainian diaspora to shape this organization, because we need to involve them in these meetings when we are communicate with policymakers and with municipalities and other stakeholders when we speak about integration. And Ščedryk is involved in project Integropolis here in Olomouc, and it's so important that you are there and speak about this, the needs and potentials of Ukrainian diaspora can, like needs that you have, but also potential that you can be really part of the Olomouc region and can give some. We can benefit from the fact that we have here Ukrainian diaspora. So what can we do to support this Ukrainian diaspora to shape these NGOs or
Thank you very much for your feedback. We appreciate this a lot. And the solution is quite easy to organize small working groups, small discussion groups, and we will disseminate the questions to our bigger Ukrainian diaspora through personal contacts, through Ukrainian group Almost Helps Ukraine, and then you will receive the propagated feedback, somehow condensed and concentrated from other sides. So we will be heavily involved in such initiatives because we are trying to apply for the plan. We are cooperating with other university center with SPEEDS, with Katspo and other representatives of the government and also university, and we are trying to coordinate efforts. So let us stay in touch.
Yeah, for sure. But you know, like when you are in Olomouc, but I don't know if you like know the map of the Olomouc region, but it's like really long, like from the south to north. But yeah, let's stay in touch and we
I would like to hear as well. So you have previously mentioned that when you are observing, watching your community, when it's about just support, like for the support, maybe not so many Ukrainians who really want to participate. But when you mentioned, when there are some practical things, much more discussion arise about. You need to mention. So you asked about what suggested you. Probably you should know those radical demands of Ukrainians here, and even all those particular demands. On that ground, it's more easier to unite Ukrainians in certain particular groups. Surely you should stay in touch and join their groups, follow those practical demands and issues that Ukrainians here every day face, and on that ground, probably you can unite them on more practical things. And then those practical things will be addressed to you, to authorities here on the regional level and maybe higher on national level, check it out.
Thank you for the important report, but I would like also to emphasize that Ukrainian diaspora here don't have only needs and demands. We have also proposals. For example, there are many issues which we would like to share and to thank the city of Olomouc. For example, we wanted to offer our hands and time to clean some areas of Olomouc or to plant some flowers, because this is what we used to do in Ukraine, and to do some small volunteer projects. We have a lot of different age groups, starting from students who are very active to retired people who would like to feel that they are still living. And we have not only what to ask, but also what to offer.
Of course, so I say potential. It's what I mean.
From both sides.
Yeah. Potential.
Thank you so much. We only have a few minutes left, so I would like to ask each of you here in the roundtable, all the panelists, to share some final thoughts, some final voice about the unity that we just discussed, of collaboration of Ukrainian diaspora or their collaboration with other actors. But also there was a question by Natalia about the particular divisions that can arise in the diaspora. If you'd like to comment on any of these aspects, the final minute.
I just will respond maybe the question from your from Natalia. You ask what are the types of Ukrainian diaspora? Well, I would say that maybe there is only one diaspora which would be defined by the definitions. But of course, and we have mentioned that there are many groups of diaspora members who have different or similar goals to protect, maintain ties with Ukraine or with the family left in Ukraine, or ties, broken ties here in Czechia, like you have mentioned. So in this sense, maybe I would mention that we good to look at those diaspora organizations and intentions, willingness to be active but everything would be under the diaspora because we cannot so much divide different.
I think one thing, it's important to kind of keep the complexity always in mind, because I feel like from the very beginning of the war there have been a lot of like categorical, polarizing, or antagonistic narratives, especially like, let's say, coming from the officials in Ukraine, the state. But when you look, and yes, like there are, like when coming back to the discussion of the tension, there are those tensions. For example, like when you look at the survey from 2023 and 2024, 30% of the population in Ukraine, for example, supported the idea of depriving those Ukrainians who left Ukraine of civil and social, certain civil and social rights when they come back. And that was a question that didn't say just men, that said Ukrainians who left, so included also women. So 30%, it's a considerable number. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that this kind of polarizing narratives that come from the officials, they don't necessarily represent the kind of specificity of the relationships that people have. And again, this is 30%. What about the other, the rest? Because again, I think online there is Olga Bizubova and my colleague, and she's currently doing research on in Ukraine and on Ukraine, on the people returning to Ukraine. And one of the things she observed that recently is that this kind of tensions that exist between like those who stayed, those who left, that this kind of interactions between people in discourse, it's different in the social media and interpersonal interactions. And they are not the same. It's important to not kind of project what we might see on the social media coming from the officials' narratives on actual interactions between people, because in interpersonal relationship, this is very often people don't encounter this kind of narratives. And even like from my experience on research on men, very few men encounter this kind of judgment. For example, if they're afraid to fight in interpersonal relationship, this is a kind of judgment that of course comes from the social media, the society in general, the projections, but also from their internalization of this judgment. But interpersonal relationships are much more complex, and I think there is a lot of kind of adequacy that exists in the interpersonal relationship, and it's important to kind of capitalize on that. Also, think about that when it comes to like state narratives, because I think there is a lot of, I think for the state it would be important to capitalize on this kind of adequacy that actually exists, and a lot of understanding and care that exists between the people, and thinking that people are not this kind of black and white categories, those who left, those who came. Many people, they live this kind of shuttle lives, go back and forth. Many men like went to fight and then deserters and then left Ukraine. So like there's so many like liminal and gray categories. So like people's real life experiences and everyday practices, they don't align with this very kind of polarizing narratives. So I would really wish for the state to kind of exploit this complexity and dialogue with this complexity, because this is a way to build this kind of trust, this kind of account for this complexity, rather than try to find simple solutions, because unfortunately they don't exist.
Thank you so much for problematizing this.
I just wanted to respond to the question regarding the structure of the Ukrainian diaspora. Let's go back to the definition of Ukrainian diaspora itself. When we are speaking about it, we also taking into account the ethnic group Crimean Tatars, because in 2023, the Verkhovna Rada named Crimean Tatars indigenous people of Ukraine. So they are supposed to be part of Ukraine. Are they also part of Ukraine with that? How is it?
Thank you.
So the question is whether they are part of Ukraine, they just from outside Ukraine or in Ukraine.
Outside the team. They are in
It depends on their own perception. Well, but surely they perceive themselves to be Ukrainians despite of their ethnic origin. Surely they are part of it.
Yes, so
Outside Ukraine.
yes, ethnic component should be also taken into account.
Yeah, so I would like also to generalize a bit final thoughts. Just imagine that today Ukraine is in the most severe demographic collapse and gap that probably other countries of, I don't know, let's say of the recent history has faced. According to recent estimations, Ukraine has, we cannot talking about just migration. So Ukraine today is the country where with the highest death rate and the lowest birth rate worldwide, EIA estimations in 2024. Well, and the population has decreased rapidly by fourth. So in 2022, it was roughly 42 million. According to the most optimistic estimation today, about 31-33 million. So taking that, I argue, and probably there are most supporters of my argument that without the assistance of the migrants, Ukrainian migrants, no matter whether men, women, I mean, the prosperity of Ukraine after the hostilities are over, after the end of the war, it's difficult to imagine that without Ukrainians left Ukraine, it can be achieved. Because nowadays, taking into account labor market in Ukraine, 74% of Ukrainian companies still show labor shortages. So according to the Ministry of Economic and Development of Ukraine, 4.5 million Ukrainian workers Ukraine will need 4.5 million workers in their stations. International Labour Organization they know 9 million. 9 million in the recent in the year to come. So from that point of view, there are some ideas that Ukraine should import workers from Bangladesh, from India, and so on.
Okay, the final word goes to Alla.
I think that Ukraine firstly should think about the return of Ukrainians, and then think about how to import illegal goods from other countries. Thank you.
I'll try to be as brief as possible. But I'd like to return to my first one question about the test. I think that's the way. I think that this way of migration or mass influence is really unique and successful because 4.5 million temporary protected people officially. If we remember, when there was 1 million of refugees in Italy, in Germany, it was a humanitarian catastrophe. So 4.5 million Ukrainians, and there is no catastrophe in Europe. 6 million together Ukrainians in the European Union, and there is no humanitarian catastrophe. So I would like to say that Ukrainians now receive really unique experience and will be ready to rebuild Ukraine and make our country really one of the best ones. Yeah, so I like it.
Well, thank you so much for all your contributions. We discussed a lot. We discussed different contributions and roles of the diaspora, but also this attention to the diversity of this highly complex groups of people. So thank you so much. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you to all of you who are here in Olomouc, and thank you also to those of you who are online. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.